Good evening, everybody. Before we begin, I'll ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices, and I'll do the same. Remind council that our procedure bylaw prescribes the use of electronic devices in council meetings. It is 6:30 p.m. I'll call this meeting to order. And we'll begin with land acknowledgement. The municipality of Brighton recognizes that its work and the work of our community partners takes place on the traditional Indigenous territory of the Mississauga, now of Alderville. We are thankful to be able to work and live in these territories. We are thankful to all the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have cared for all of the lands we now call Canada. Brighton is honored to collaborate with Indigenous partners, stakeholders, and communities whenever we are able. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council approve the July 17th, 2024 planning meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of council, have you any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. And there are none noted. We have no delegations this evening, which brings us to our statutory public meeting. It's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council move into the statutory public meeting July 17th, 2024 at 6:31 p.m. Any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. There is a preamble that I read as we enter the statutory public meeting. And it has changed because of fairly significant regulatory changes around who may appeal council's decisions. So the statement that you see in the agenda package, members of council and those who have read it online, is different than the one I will be reading now. The municipality of Brighton takes steps beyond the requirements of the Planning Act to engage the community in land use planning initiatives. The municipality also holds a statutory public meeting on the planning matter, and then receives a staff report with a recommendation on which council will make a decision. Council depends on the community to provide input during this meeting for our decision. This input may be received in advance of the statutory public meeting by sending correspondence to the clerk's office and/or by making an oral submission to council at the statutory public meeting. This will best inform council on the land use planning matter prior to council making our final decision. Recent statutory changes limit appeal rights to only the applicant and specified regulated persons. For details on or information on the new appeal process, please visit the municipal website or contact the clerk's office. The first item in our statutory public meeting is file number B08, 2024. The agent is Foten Planning and Design. This is a consent application and the location is Georgina Street. This evening, the public meeting for this matter is with regard to a consent application, and the purpose is to request a decision from council on the proposed consent. Mrs. Deck, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent application given?
Notice of the consent application was sent by mail on June 26th, 2024 to all property owners within 60 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a signed notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent application?
The purpose of consent application B08, 2024 is to sever the property located at the corner of Georgina Street and Hardy Lane to create one new lot to facilitate the proposed use of a long-term care facility. The proposed severed lands would have a lot area of 1.62 hectares or 4.02 acres, with a lot frontage of approximately 162.76 meters, 531.5 feet on Georgina Street. Not shown in the published agenda, planning staff are now also recommending the following condition be added to this recommendation: that the proponent enter into a development agreement with the municipality for the purposes of establishing the terms and conditions for the development of the land, particularly regarding engineering design of services and roadway improvements, construction of on-site and off-site municipal services, construction sureties, and related financial cost-sharing arrangements. Planning staff have received comments from 2 neighboring property owners with concerns regarding traffic, servicing, and future roadway connections. As outlined within the staff report, a zoning bylaw amendment is included as a condition of consent to ensure appropriate site-specific performance standards for the future long-term care facility and to address any zoning deficiencies for the retained parcel created as a result of the proposed severance. To form a complete application for a zoning bylaw amendment, functional servicing report, a stormwater management report, and traffic impact report, along with other studies and reports, will address the concerns raised by the neighboring property owners. In addition, a site plan control application will be required if the consent and future zoning bylaw amendment application are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. And for the record, please note that Councillor Rowley left the chamber at 6:35 p.m. and returned at 6:36 p.m. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent application? Are there any questions or comments regarding the proposed consent application from members of council? Mrs. Deck, do you have any final comments?
Not at this time.
Does council wish to make a decision on this consent application? Motion is
Hello.
moved. Oh,
Sorry, we're trying to make a comment and not been able to.
are you able to put your video on?
Sorry, can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Are you able to put your
Okay.
video on?
Yes, although I shouldn't have to. So we live on Georgina Street and we have some concerns related to the property. It directly abuts us on 2 fronts.
Could you state your name for the record, please?
My name's Richard Fake.
Thank you.
It's come to light today since we spoke with the town that the long-term care home is for nearly 300 beds, which, given the road and the fact that there's originally it was meant to be a small road alongside of ours, now makes us concerned as to the impact it's going to have both on our property from a safety perspective, but also on the surrounding area, as there seems to be no plans that have been shared by the developer as to what they want, what they envisage.
Could you repeat that last bit again? You were breaking up.
So the developer has not shared any plans relating to what their envisaged idea is, how they're requesting to build along 2 fronts of our property, and it's come to light today that the long-term care home will have just under 300 beds, which means it's a significant size.
Yeah, so it's not unusual that we would not see detailed designs or really any designs of any kind at this stage, as this is a consent application for severance.
It feels though the information has been less than forthcoming in transparency, that they're planning 300 beds, or just under 300 beds. That's only come to light in the last couple of hours.
Perhaps that's the case. Mrs. Deck, do you have any comment?
Through you, Mary. Yes, at this time, it is just the consent application. And as we see in the conditions, a zoning bylaw amendment application will be forthcoming. And they will have to clear that condition, i.e. the zoning bylaw amendment application in the future. At that time, notice will again be given. So neighboring property owners will receive a notice in the mail and will have additional information, i.e. a site plan, conceptual site plan. We're seeing more conceptual floor plans and elevations at that point. So at this time, we're just dealing with the consent application. But at the time of the zoning bylaw amendment, they will see those future conceptual plans.
Did you hear that, Rich?
I did, yeah. It just seems that there's only part of the information being shared, and then there's information we're having to drag out as property owners, out to the town.
Yeah, not unusual at this stage.
Maybe not unusual, but it's not. It doesn't feel right. It's a significant. It's a significant development, and there's part of that plan is to put these on our property for that road, So it would be appreciated there being full transparency, in addition to the increased traffic it's going to bring and the danger to our children and elderly relatives that use that road for walking and exercise.
Fair enough. So those more detailed designs will be available during, assuming council passes the consent, would be available at a future date when the zoning bylaw amendment comes forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before I move forward, I'll ask if there's anyone else present in the gallery or on Zoom who has questions or comments on the consent. Does the applicant the agent wish to do a presentation? Mrs. Deck, are you aware of that?
They did submit a presentation. FOTEN is available virtually if they'd like to do their presentation at this time.
Yeah, we're happy to do a presentation just to give a bit more information. Will you be sharing the presentation?
It's coming.
Okay.
Okay, we can see it.
Okay, I can't see it, but I'm assuming you're on slide 1.
Do you have the presentation that you could share?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do.
Might be the better way to go.
Okay, let's do that. So,
And then people watching on Zoom would be able to, or on YouTube would be able to see it too.
okay. So, let me share.
You are sharing your screen.
Okay, everyone can see the screen here.
Yes.
All right. Let me just move one thing. Okay. So, hi everybody. My name is Claire Stevenson Blythe, and I'm a planner from FOTEN Planning and Design. Tonight, I'm presenting the application B08 2024 on behalf of our client, Omni Living Inc., who is here tonight for the property located at Georgina Street and Hardy Lane in Brighton. So in this presentation, I'll go over the location, the application overview, the official plan designation, the zoning bylaw zone, proposed severance details, servicing considerations, and next steps. So here are the subject lands. They are located off Georgina Street, where it intersects with Hardy Lane on the east side of Brighton. The lands have an irregular shape which jogs north and south and has a small amount of frontage off Dundas Street. The lands are currently vacant. As noted, the owner of the subject lands is Omni Living Inc., and our team is representing them as their applicant. So the purpose of this consent is to sever the subject property to create one new lot to facilitate the proposed use of a long-term care facility. The lands proposed to be severed are 1.62 hectares, leaving 2.78 hectares retained on the existing parcel. The proposed severance will have a lot frontage of approximately 163 meters along Georgina Street. So this is the official plan designation. As noted with the blue perimeter on this map, the subject lands are designated as residential in the Brighton official plan and as within the urban area. So lands generally within the urban area are intended to have intensification and some residential development to these lands. Anything to the east of Georgina Street is not included in the urban area and likely won't receive the same level of intensification. The subject lands are subject to 2 different zones in Brighton zoning bylaw. So the agricultural exception 2 zone is for the majority of the site, which you can see here as the red area. And the urban residential 1 zone is at the south of the site with frontage on Dundas Street. So that southern part of the site with some frontage on Dundas and all of the surrounding, many of the surrounding lots are also zoned urban residential 1. So at this stage, I could have noted before, there are no amendments or changes to the official plan proposed. And at this stage, there are no proposed changes to the zoning bylaw. However, as we've noted, a zoning bylaw amendment application is forthcoming, but right now we are really just dealing with the parcel of land that is going from one owner to another in the hopes of facilitating the long-term care facility, but that will be the zoning bylaw amendment application. So here's the proposed severance. So it's indicated by the red lines. As noted previously, this proposal is to sever 1.62 hectares from the subject lands with 2.78 hectares retained. The lot frontage approximately 163 meters along Georgina Street. The blue lines indicate the conveyances to the municipality. So a 9 by 9 meter site triangle is proposed at the north and south corner on Georgina Street. And a road allowance is proposed along Georgina Street to maintain a 26-meter right-of-way and road allowance for the future. Oh, and also a road allowance for the future Singleton Street extension to the north of the lands to maintain a 20-meter right-of-way. So there are some servicing considerations. So a preliminary servicing statement was prepared by MTE Consultants as part of the consent application. It outlines existing conditions and proposes servicing connections where none are currently available. The owner has acknowledged that off-site works and servicing upgrades will be required prior to any development on the site. And a functional servicing report, which goes through this in detail, will be completed at the zoning bylaw amendment stage to confirm that adequate servicing can be provided to facilitate the development. So lastly, looking at next steps. So in regards to this application, the next step is council decision followed by a 20-day appeal period. We would then proceed with the zoning bylaw amendment application. As of now, we have submitted a request with the municipality for a pre-application consultation meeting, which is essentially the first step. So we're very early in that process. Following this, our team will prepare and submit a zoning bylaw amendment application. So this is a public process where the public will have opportunity to comment on as we go through it, and where all the details of the proposed development will be included there. At the consent stage, really, we're looking at the property severance that's happening, but the zoning bylaw stage amendment stage will have all those details. So should the consent and zoning bylaw amendment application be approved, we would then proceed to site plan control. That's it. Thanks so much for listening, and I will end sharing. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Claire. And I didn't get you to introduce yourself for the record. Could you please do that?
Yep. Claire Stevenson Blythe. I'm a planner from FOTEN Planning and Design.
Thank you. Okay, so I will again say, are there any persons present who have questions or comments on the consent? Could you come to the microphone, please, sir? You're on.
Hi, I'm James Lermer, for the record. I live at 54 Georgina Street. I used to live at 30, and then we moved on. Anyways, I had a question. I'm hoping this is the forum where I can ask just a few more questions to clarify what the consent is about. I know it's to sever Georgina Street. Now we just talked about it, but can you identify to me like the boundaries of that property that are like that we're actually dividing, so I get a better understanding of that?
Are you able to describe the boundaries, Mrs. Deck?
Oh, yeah.
Through you, Mary, it might be helpful, Claire, if you're able to share your screen again, just of the concept map as well as the subject lands map, if that's okay, Mary.
Yes, it is.
So we can see that that is the subject lands map that we're seeing right above our screen, outlined in blue on the right, and sort of that hatched area, the same location here for both the maps. And Claire, if you're able to just go to I believe the next slide, just about Yeah, perfect. So the area outlined in red is the severed land, which will facilitate the development of the long-term care facility, with the remaining portion as the retained lands.
Perfect. And so my question then is or statement is that obviously discussions have been had with planning and the developer here. And can you explain to me what the remaining portion, like that portion to the west of the severed piece is for? Is that for a roadway? Or that part, yeah, right there?
Mrs. Deck?
There are no plans for the retained lands at this time.
Okay, and then to the north of it then, that is where you're asking for is that 10 meters? Like when I was reading, it's 10 meters to the north of that severance? Like where the blue line and the red line are divided, like they're not touching there, like that area?
Mrs. Deck?
Through you, Mary, yes. So you're seeing that the severed lands will be outlined in red.
Yeah,
The blue lines are all to be conveyed to the municipality for road widening. So the portion that we're seeing running south along Georgina will be conveyed as road widening, as well as the lands at the north portion of the severed lands. So that will be a Singleton Street extension to support future development at that time.
okay, and is that one that's on the north side of that actually wide enough to support a roadway?
Through you, Mayor? No, not at this time. So the municipality and the landowner to the north were in contact last week regarding that portion. So at this time, the applicant is proposing to provide 10 meters, so half of a 20-meter road allowance, with the other half, the remaining 10 meters, to be looked at with the adjacent landowner. So that typically is more of a private process that we encourage landowners to work together on. And Director Paul Walsh was in contact with that adjacent landowner on that information. At this time, there's no agreement that is in place. We do not need anything from that adjacent landowner. But at this time, only 10 meters is being provided from the applicant for that future road connection.
Okay, and then I guess an amendment to this consent or whatever the rules are would be applied if that said landowner does not want to give up that 10 meters, like I guess, or is it just the owner of the property would then have to concede the entire road allowance on their property for Singleton to be extended there?
Only if Singleton was to be extended through would we require it
Yeah,
from the adjacent landowner. So it depends on what the adjacent landowner has plans, and we don't know what that is at the moment.
okay. And then another question I had about this is, I understand that there's traffic studies to come. I understand that this is early in the process. I'm very understanding of where we're at, but again, it seems that this is well-defined, well-discussed, and I would agree with Rich that the information about the size and magnitude of this project hasn't been on display, and we're making a decision to sever lands based on this becoming a future long-term care facility. So the impacts are actually quite large, right? Because this consent, as long as they tick the boxes on the sheet, will likely create the ability for this developer to put that building on that property or something of similar size, minus the adjustments if the landowner, agrees or disagrees with the giving up 10 meters of their land, yada, yada, yada. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, we're pretty deep in the weeds here. And I just want to make a statement that this is a very large building in a very quiet part of Brighton. When we had when we put a retirement home in Brighton and is still being constructed, it was quite a disturbance, but it's needed. And I do support the need for long-term care facilities, just as a Brightonian. And I think it is a good thing for the community, but I do think that we should take a step back and think about where we're choosing to put this giant building. I don't know if people understand how big a 256 bed nursing home is. Perhaps Claire, I think it is, could show us what a 256 bed nursing home long-term care facility actually looks like. It's quite enormous. And I'm not saying it doesn't belong on Georgina Street, but I am saying that we are getting busier in that corner of Brighton. There are a lot more land severances. I think a lot of this meeting today is severances on Whites Road or consents on Smith and Dundas with the new subdivision. Like, there's lots of stuff going on in that corner. It's a hot corner, which is going to increase traffic density and increase safety risks on actually all the roads, not just Georgina Street. And I just think council should understand that when they're driving up in the, the controlled 40 kilometers an hour zone up to Georgina Street, that out of the distance in the horizon is going to be a giant building, a long-term care facility. Again, I'm okay with that, but what comes with that is increased traffic. There's going to be deliveries, workers, shift work, visitors, and it actually will impact that area dramatically. And I do believe that the traffic will not come all from that Brighton High School Division Street up. It will come from, sorry, I think it's Dundas. I'm on the spot, so I'm nervous, but whatever the street is, I should know.
It's Dundas.
But Dundas, sorry. But the traffic will come from the north, like down from the north. A lot of it will come down Georgina Street. And if we've all, or any of us have been on Georgina Street, it is a country road. That's why we bought it. We bought there. There's deep ditches and gutters. Again, it's a country road with less density. It's kind of, you accept what you get in a country road. But this is a large commercial facility. It's not small. And I actually think that council has to understand that. They probably do, but I'm stating it for the record for me and my family, and actually all the families that do live there. And unfortunately, like, we're down the road a bit. This is a large building going amongst a quiet little neighborhood up in there. So it is good for Brighton to have a long-term care facility. I get it. But I think that I just took a step back myself when I saw the sheer magnitude of what we're actually asking for. It makes sense on Highway 2. It's, it's easily accessible. It's on a major highway. It makes sense there. Here, I'm not sure the size of that building makes sense. So anyways, I appreciate the floor. I wanted to state the fact that we support long-term care in our area. I am worried about traffic. So if this does go through, because again, we're kind of powerless in a way, because council will decide, which is fine. But I think when you're deciding, I do want you to imagine what that looks like on that road. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who has any comments on this proposed consent? And I will ask again.
Sorry, just this is Nadia Nelson from Nelson Thake from 30 Georgina Street.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to follow up on a statement that you made earlier in terms of you used the word requirement, and I know I'm being pedantic here. The property owner is being required to give up that portion potentially of that 10 meters if the road should be widened, the proposed road of Singleton there. So can you clarify what you meant by saying required?
I believe it will be a condition of consent. Mrs. Deck?
I'm sorry, maybe just to clarify, are you talking about the road widening along Georgina Street or Singleton?
Of Singleton, so to the north of there, so we're the property owners there, so that the road widening there, because the statement was around the property owner being required.
Through you, Mayor, not at this time, no. I believe Paul has had a good conversation with you last week regarding the future road connections, potentially to the west, but at this current time, the applicant is only providing that 10 meters, and only in the time at which Singleton Street may be extended would there be road widening required by yourselves, the landowners. But as I've mentioned, that's more of a private process that typically happens between landowners.
Understood, and I do confirm that we did have a conversation with Paul, but at no time in the conversation did the word require come up. In fact, we were very vocal about the, basically being forced. Let me just be completely transparent, because that required sounds like we're potentially being forced to give up that 10 meters if it should so be required for the extension of widening of that road.
Mrs. Deck?
I think I might pass this baton over to Paul Walsh here.
I thought that might happen at some point. Director Walsh?
Through the mayor to council. Thank you, Mrs. Stake. Yes, to follow up on our conversation, the ask for lands dedicated to a future extension of Singleton is derived from our secondary planning exercise that will be coming forward to council in a more detailed, robust way shortly in August or September. And so in our review of the needs of the lands in the general easterly area, that there would be the need for additional road connections that would help support emergency services deliveries without some impediments of some geometrics of roadways and things like that. So there is the identification that this would be the best location for one of those connections. And typically landowners who get together and want a shared road for a future plan of subdivision or other development do so with some interest because it's mutually benefiting. So that was the nature of our telephone conversation, as you may recall. Could it be actually required at some time? I won't be elusive in saying yes, it might be required at some time if once the secondary plan is established and that's showing the location of a future road and it has a status in the official plan, it might take on that implication. But typically what happens is someone's getting roads and services at half the price with a development opportunity that goes along with it. It's usually something that is not objected to. And so I would encourage you to consider it in that light.
Thanks, Paul, for the summarization. I'm going to raise concern, though, during that conversation. We didn't know, it was a 250 plus care home, which, when we start talking about deliveries is quite a different thing to, a few houses. But furthermore, it was, we left it with our understanding was there was no commitment required on our part with regards to making a decision whether to provide, support for that easement or not. Not that actually at a further point in time we may be forced to provide it, which actually sort of, goes against what we were trying to understand. So now again, it feels it feels like there's some duplicity in this from both the developer and the town.
There is the option going forward that all the road allowance would be provided from the severed lot. It's, there might be some interest there to do that from that party at that time, in which case, however, the abutting owners, if that's yourself, will be disadvantaged cost-wise, but that is an option B.
Yeah, I think the term cost-wise we're not too keen on because, again, as we said, we already pay a ridiculous amount in property tax. We don't have, we're not financially motivated really by this. So I think there's our concern is we're going to find at some point in the next couple of months, council passes this approval and then we're forced to surrender part of our land so that a road can be built to, enrich a developer and a long-term care facility, which we're not against the facility at all. It's more the lack of transparency in this and the number of unanswered questions whereby, no one from either the developer or any of the plannings have actually come and called us or written to us or, tried to say, knock on our door and say, hey, we're thinking about this. We may need some things here. Can we have a conversation around it? It does feel very much like had we not seen that sign and had we, not opened the mail, we would have been blindsided by this until the wrecking balls turn up.
Yeah, I can understand that. I'll just say that there really is two issues. One is the severance, and one is the long-term needs of the municipality for its road network to allow for orderly development for future inhabitants. So they are two different issues. It's the municipality that's telling the proponent here that we need a future road for the good standards of the municipality. So No, it's not intended that this road is somehow benefiting the proponent. In fact, I think they're being agreeable with the asks of staff in advancing good planning for the municipality. It really is a separate issue, however, from the actual consent.
Sorry, I disagree. It's the same issue because that land is currently a field with a very mature tree line along it. The road could be placed anywhere by the developer in terms of to facilitate the town. However, from the initial designs, they're already showing that they want to abut against ours and take some of our properties so that they can, maximize their own return on investment, which is fair, But I think there clearly is a motive here. The fact, it's already been suggested that they'll be speedy with follow-up plans and further plans. So clearly there are designs that have already been established. We're asking for some certainty here as to what is it actually you want what's the end game. But also not to be left where we may come off disadvantaged by this. Yes, the road is important, but right now it's a field. The road's not very useful for a field. If there were houses being built there, then you could build that road quite easily into the housing estate. If you're building a long-term care home, it's a few car parking spaces at worst that you may be losing, or a few beds or something like that on what is a sizable lot. It does feel that there's a lot of unanswered questions here, and it does feel that there's been, it's not just us. There's also houses to the south of their field where, how are they going to be? What's their quality of life going to be like when all of a sudden there's this huge, enormous building by them, and there's all this construction and all these delivery vehicles and various other things, where the road until very recently washed away at the end every year as well. I think that it does feel like this has been very forced and very poorly thought out.
I just wanted to.
I do think there's some confusion with the intent of the northern portion of this property that the municipality is requesting, and I think the confusion is that it is not the intention of the municipality to create a roadway for this development should it move forward. This development would be accessed from another portion, either Georgina Street or Hardy Lane, I don't know which. But the future development of Singleton Street is exactly that, future development. So we're requiring through this consent that through the consent, a portion of the new future road area be granted to the municipality for a future extension of Singleton Street, whenever that may happen, but not as part of this potential development. Am I off base, staff?
No, that's exactly correct,
Right.
Mayor. And
Right.
just for further clarification, the real details as been described will come forward through the zoning bylaw amendment. So the zoning bylaw amendment is a condition of the consent. So if the zoning bylaw, when all the details come forward in terms of building height, its dimensions, location on the lot coverage, et cetera, is now shown. And if that remains an objectionable item, if the zoning bylaw were to fail, the severance also fails. And the lot will not be created.
Right. Were there any further comments? Go ahead, James.
So I just had a brief comment in follow-up with the 10 meters again. It's interesting that we would only ask the current developer to give up 10 now in hopes that some future owner, whether it be Rich and his family or somebody else, are going to happily and willingly give up 10. And if they don't, then you're going to take it anyways. That seems weird to me, or potentially take it anyways. So we're basing a consent with a 10, so to me, you should be asking for 20 from the current consent. It doesn't make sense and allowed. And again, I understand there's motivations. The municipality might want the most beds possible in a long-term care facility, and that's what we're promoting. There's also money in this for people. So like, we're just being realistic. We can have a long-term care facility, but I'm on Richard's side here because this doesn't really make sense. The council here is going to make a decision. And again, maybe you won't be in council at the time, but this decision will matter to somebody. It could matter to Richard and his family if they're still there when Brighton comes at some point. Maybe someone else in your chair and asks that 10 meters be given up at that time. It just doesn't seem right to me. I think that is to me, that's an awkward thought. I just think that it should be based on the facts and what we have available to us right now. The road should be to me, the roadway should be through the property where it's proposed to be. Sorry, you get my point.
No, I get it. And I think it's a fair comment. I just think through the normal course of planning, when we do these subdividing of land and we ask for a portion of something for public use, we take half from the one property, half from the other. Knowing that, right? And that's sort of the normal process. And I think that's what staff have done here today. They've asked for the municipality to take half of that roadway for free, because we're going to get it for free. It's a requirement.
Yeah.
So the taxpayer doesn't cost the taxpayer a dime. In fact, it costs the applicant all the money because they're the ones paying for this application. And then in the future, when we go to, should Singleton go through, it would be somebody's requirement to purchase the other 10 meters from the other landowner. So the other landowner would benefit financially from the extension of Singleton Street. Probably a developer would purchase that land because that would be a requirement of the municipality for their subdivision to come through.
I know, and I'm just saying that's probably in the future.
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what we have is facts in front of us. And in a homeowner who's looking for long-term stay in that place, you have the answer from the homeowner as it stands today. And so for me, I think there should be an adjustment to this application.
Thank you for your comment.
We would all fully support of James's comment regarding the adjustment. For us, whilst money is something we all need, it's not a motivator. We bought this home with a view of it was going to be a home for our family and eventually, hopefully, for our children to be able to live in, and raise their own families. We looked into severing the side of our lots a couple of years ago so we could build a home for an elderly relative, and were told that wasn't in the plan, so we converted our garage instead in order to facilitate that. This now seems very much a case of an underhanded, very underhanded, where a developer with deep pockets comes along and all of a sudden actually severing and changing property lines and things is very valuable. And this is very much after, as part of that garage profession, we spent 50 grand putting a septic tank in because there wasn't sewage or anything like that. So now, and that directly abuts where that 10-meter easement would be. So I'm going to put on record, we're not trying to be difficult. We understand the need for a long-term care home, but what we are asking is for some common courtesy, and reality is the money is not a big motivator for us. We want somewhere to call home. We bought that home because it has a very mature tree line. That easement goes straight through that tree line, meaning you're going to cut down all those trees that have been there for 30 or 40 years. And for what? To build a road that could be moved 10 meters to the south onto land that's going to be developed with a massive care home. It just feels like it's picking on the small guy.
Noted. Thank you for that. Any other comments from staff on that with that regard? No. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? I will turn back to council and see if council has any questions now that we've gone through some dialogue. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Director Walsh had mentioned that it is a possibility to ask for all 20 meters from the proponent. Did I hear that correctly, Director?
That's correct. By one of two means. One is a revision to the consent as we get into the details, maybe allowing the applicant and the stakes to have some discussion. But hearing the results of that, if it were to occur, then we can make an adjustment to consent boundaries. Or two, if we, once through the zoning, it would be subject to site plan control, and under Section 41 of the Planning Act, under site plan control, we're allowed to ask for road widening. So that might mean that there'll be an additional 10 meters from the subject lands, but for presumably the 4 acres that they've indicated a need for, they know that's maybe a fairly compact development for them in terms of all their site needs. So that could have an impact on their site design. So it might be best that there be a discussion with the takes and the applicant in terms of the final consent configuration to explore option B if need be.
Thank you both. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So it appears that the benefiting party in this application is clearly the developer, the applicant. The residents to the north, I am moved by what they say. They purchased X amount of property. They serve to lose property. Money is not a consideration for them. And if we are being asked for something and we have an opportunity to have that cost, whether it be money or land, that should be borne by the benefiting party, which is the applicant. So I would be in favor of compelling them to have that increased from 10 to 20.
Thank you for that. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Wright?
I would agree with Councillor Butwell. I'm inclined to ask for the full 20 and somehow maybe the site can be adjusted. They've got what still looks like a bit of space to work with in behind. Maybe there can be some adjustments.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Fredis?
Yes, I would concur with Councillor Wright and Councillor Butwell. I think so that it minimizes costs all the way around, perhaps the consent application go back and to address the full 20 meter out of the requested severance so that nobody spends too much money going downstream on this, and we find out when we get to the next phase that there's another complication. Perhaps address it now and resolve it.
Director Walsh or Mrs. Deck, I'm hearing from council that they'd like you to have further conversations with the applicant. Would it be best then to refer this entire consent back to staff for review and come back with a report?
I think it might be appropriate to have it deferred to give an opportunity for the applicant and the abutting landowner to have a conversation about this issue. Further, as John Gooding has pointed out to me as well, that there may be need for revisions to lot as a result of the studies that have been identified as needed, particularly traffic impact report, sightlines for roadways and things like that. So there could be additional revisions following those studies. So maybe another round of consideration for amendments at some time. So, remembering that this is a condition of consent, the zoning bylaw amendment will be bringing forward and looking at all those issues at that time. So I suspect there might be some revisions to the lot through the zone amendment. But a deferral of 1 month shouldn't be a burden on anyone if we can get some of the basics and some of the direction settled.
Thank you, Director. So the motion I've drafted reads that council refer consent B08/2024 to staff for further review and report back to council at a future council planning meeting. Does that make sense to you, sir? That's clear direction. Is there a mover?
Excuse me, if I may just have one final word. I had my hand raised, but it was difficult. My name's Miles Weeks. I'm a senior planner with FO10 Planning and Design. If I can have permission to speak, I would appreciate it.
I missed your last name, Miles. Sorry.
Miles Weeks, Weekes.
Go ahead, Mr. Weeks.
So I appreciate the comments that have been heard tonight, and if it's council's will to defer the matter, we can certainly do so. I think we'd rather everyone feel as comfortable as they can with the application. That being said, I do want to clarify that I agree with what Mr. Walsh said earlier. The roadway, the Singleton extension to the north of the property, has no benefit to the proposed development. It would be our preference not to provide it. In fact, we've worked with municipal staff as it was requested by the municipality. So As long as that's clear with council and even the neighboring property owners that, it's not something that we've benefit rather from, and it's not something that, we'd prefer to provide. It is an expense to the developer. So, not to seek any sort of sympathy there. I just want to clarify that this is a request from the municipality, and we are working to satisfy the requirements of the municipality. So if a deferral is the best path forward in your opinions, we would be happy to discuss it further with staff. But I just wanted to clarify that one point.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks. Appreciate your comments. So I'll now ask for a mover.
Possible to.
Now who's talking?
Oh, sorry. This is Raheem Hirji from Omni Quality Living.
Go ahead, Mr. Hirji.
Oh, sorry for not being on camera. I'm on transit. I just wanted to echo what Miles said. We're working together on the development right now. So Omni operates long-term care properties all throughout Ontario. We actually have a long-term care home in Brighton right now, which we're proud to be a part of the community. The way the current structure works is that these licenses will expire. So it's a requirement of the provincial government to upgrade these licenses. And that's why you'll see an awkward number like 256, because the requirement is to be in multiples of 32 per the latest design standards and regulations. So we agree that there needs to be adequate long-term care in this community. And I want to respond to us being less than transparent, and Rich, happy to chat offline and make a formal introduction. I don't think we have all our ducks in a row yet in terms of a design, so it's not like we have something in our back pocket to just slam on the table here. We are working through this and trying to figure out what works best in the community, and I think there's a lot left to be done in terms of design and studies and how this best flows and makes a blend to address some of these concerns. So I'm not sure if that has anything to do with the actual application here, but we do want to be collaborative and reach out to our neighbors. And apologies for not doing that before. We wanted to come to our neighbors when we had something more fulsome in terms of a plan, in terms of a design. There's so many elements that go into a building like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hirji. I think we appreciate that, and certainly members of council understand we're at the consent stage, and there's some pre-consultation to be done, which would bring more clarity to things. So I'm sure the neighbors appreciate that you're wanting to reach out and have those conversations as well. Is there anyone else who wants to talk before I get a motion on the floor here? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Just curious.
Your name for the record.
Janine Zwierink.
Thank you.
We recently moved to
Sorry,
the area.
the clerk's asking for you to spell your last name.
ZWEERINK.
Thank you.
Just curious, have you looked at other areas to place this home besides in the Brighton/Smithfield country hamlet?
I'm guessing she's asking you, Mr. Hirji.
Sure, absolutely. So the way the licensing works from the provincial government is we can't leave certain boundaries, so that has to be in the area. Like I said, we have a long-term care home there, and the provincial government, like we all are incentivized not to have beds leave certain communities and leave a gap. Through our various market studies, we know there's a significant demand in an aging population, which I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone, where there is a significant need, not only for our residents, our future residents, the staff that support it. So there's a lot that goes into this, but it's not like we can take these licenses out of this community and put them somewhere else. There are certain boundaries that Ontario Health predictates where we have to be. So it's subject to the availability of land, but within a certain community. Otherwise, we would just be leaving this community with a gap because we would be taking those licenses out of this community. So it would actually be a net loss of beds here.
Yeah, so I'm not opposed to it not being in the community, but that location specifically, I think of areas like along Highway 2 on either side of No Frills or down Prince Edward. There's lots of other areas that are more like less residential or country or small hamlet or village-like, as opposed to where you've chosen to possibly put this home of this magnitude.
Absolutely, and I think it was the subject of availability of land and servicing and everything that goes into connecting this. This, in our assessment, was the best location for one. Again, a lot of the design elements we feel will put the community at ease, and have this more integrated than stick out, for lack of a better term.
So you have looked at other areas?
We have. We've even looked at a phased approach on site, and we've had some experience in other municipalities and redeveloping and retrofitting our existing space. Unfortunately, that becomes very complex. Some of our existing long-term care homes are old, and you never know what you're going to find once you break down some walls. It is way more efficient to build a greenfield project.
Thank you, Mr. Hirji. Anything further from the public? Councillor Butwell?
Thank you, and through you, just thought it might be useful information for those in the gallery that Hardy Lane is 66 feet wide already and does meet the minimum requirements for a road. So there are options to the south of that pocket as well.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Okay, the motion. Would someone like to move it now? It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wright, and I'll read it again for everyone's edification. That council refer consent B08-2024 to staff for further review and report back to council at future council planning meeting. Is there any discussion? Councillor Butwell.
Always me. Thank you, and through you, I think that I would like, and it's not my motion, but Councillor Rowley, if we could include the specific concern in that motion, that this be addressed in that motion.
I think it was noted there were other things that staff also wanted to review, so I wanted to leave it open.
I have no objection, provided that we see that when it comes back.
I'm sure if we don't see it, there will be a good reason and staff will identify that good reason. Anything further from members of council? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Our second item in our statutory public meeting is consent B11-2024. The applicant is Stephen Tobey. It is a consent and rezoning application at 175A Ontario Street and 169 Ontario Street. The purpose is to request a decision from council on a proposed consent and rezoning. Mrs. Deck, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent application given?
Mayor, just to clarify, this is just a consent application. My apologies. The mayor's notes read consent and rezoning. It is just consent. Just wanted to clarify that for you and members in the alley.
Carry on.
Notice of the consent application was sent by mail on June 26, 2024 to all property owners within 60 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a sign notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent application?
The purpose of consent application B11-2024 is to sever a 0.52 hectare or 1.28 acre portion of the property located at 175A Ontario Street and add it to the vacant property located at 169 Ontario Street. The application will result in the retained lands located at 175A Ontario Street, having a total lot area of approximately 0.08 hectares or 0.21 acres, with 14.06 meters, 46 feet of frontage on Ontario Street. The severed and benefiting lands, although not currently proposed through this application, are intended to support a future residential subdivision known as Trailside Woods. During the application for absolute titles process for the subject lands, a notice of objection was received, disputing the ownership of the driveway located on the property, and a settlement has not been reached. The lot addition application will serve to consolidate the lands into one parcel that will be subject to the registration of absolute title as required for an application for a plan of subdivision. The remaining lot with the disputed driveway will remain subject to a title legal review by the two parties. A legal opinion has been provided from the applicant outlining that the severance application may continue without negatively impacting the dispute matter or subdivision application. The municipality has received a letter of objection from the neighboring property owner at 177 Ontario Street for the consent application B11-2024 attached to the council report for reference. The municipality has also received comments from a neighboring property owner, which were addressed by email. Planning staff have received a legal opinion from the municipal solicitor indicating that the consent application B11-2024 can continue without negating the notice of objection filed against the application for absolute title. The letter from our municipal solicitor states, in this regard, the writer concurs with the opinion put forward by Mr. Burgess, solicitor for 1984783 Ontario Inc., and that the severance application will not serve to negatively impact the subdivision application, nor does it serve to prejudice the notice of objection filed by Mr. and Ms. Hamilton with respect to ownership of the laneway. Accordingly, I see no reason why the consent severance application cannot proceed at this time, notwithstanding the notice of objection filed by the Hamiltons. It is of importance to note that if the severance application is successful, the lands on which the laneway is situated will serve to be a standalone piece of property owned by the developer, subject to the objection filed by the neighboring property owner. As such, it will remain up to the developer and adjoining neighbors to resolve this issue, which may result in the lands being placed back into land titles application. A further application for dealing with the subject lands could be avoided if some resolution could be reached between the developer and the neighbors. However, this is not a concern to the municipality and does not serve as an impediment to follow for the consent application to proceed at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent application? Come on up, Councillor Hamilton from Karine Township.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a whole lot different from this side, I gotta tell you. It's very, very personal. Thank you. My name is Sherry Hamilton, for your record, and I'm here this evening representing myself, my husband Alex, and we own the property at 177 Ontario Street. I'm joined by Alex and my daughter, who currently lives at that address. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address this issue. You have received our impact statement and our statement of claim, which is based on 75 years of adverse possession. We have now been waiting more than 3 years to have our claim addressed. Most recently, our lawyer contacted Tobey Development's lawyer on May 15th, asking if they had submitted our file for consideration to the Director of Titles. We have not yet received a response to that inquiry. Tobey Developments has made no effort to resolve this claim by submitting it for consideration to a proper hearing. They have effectively delayed their own application for absolute title by failing to do so. Even more shocking, and I just learned that they actually consulted another solicitor. When I spoke with Ms. Deck last week, she informed me that municipal staff had a legal opinion that convinced them to bring this before council from the applicant's lawyer. That's all she said to me last week. We have an opposing opinion. It was such a clear conflict of resolution that I felt it compromises the impartiality of municipal staff to say such a thing. A lawyer whose primary function is to represent his client has influenced municipal staff to advance this decision-making process. So this process was in way before a municipal solicitor was consulted, and that is insulting. Influence municipal staff to advance a decision-making process in a way that erodes public trust and compromises our right to a fair hearing. We have a right to be fairly heard. We've been waiting 3 years. By withholding our claim from a proper review process, Tobey Developments avoids dealing with us and has inflicted further harm by convincing staff to initiate this process. We encourage council to halt all decision-making activity on this file until our claim can be resolved. Piling on to a legal decision that originally came forward through conflict of interest only complicates the situation and further erodes public trust. We have a right to a fair hearing before any changes are made to this property. Can I submit these for your written record? Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Hamilton. Are there any other persons present who have questions or comments with regard to this application? Mr. Tobey?
Stephen Tobey. Just for clarification tonight, piece of property we're talking about is not owned by Tobey Developments, Gordon Tobey Developments. It's owned by a totally separate company, 1984783. So it was a very emotional plea Mrs. Hamilton has put towards you that she did not get her day in court. The way these processes work, just to kind of clarify, every subdivision which comes into this town, you must prove that you own every single square inch of that subdivision. So that process called land titles or absolute title. And essentially, you send a surveyor in, he puts all the pins in everywhere. And then every homeowner which is surrounding this property is contacted and asked if they agree with those pins. In the case of Mrs. Hamilton, there is essentially a blank lot beside their property. They've been using the driveway there for years and years. The ownership before land titles is in the developer's name. And Mrs. Hamilton and her family have every right to dispute that based on the fact that they have been using the driveway for years. So the process which we're asking for here is not to prevent her day in court. I will gladly give her day in court. The process we're asking for here is to sever this property off and not prevent the land titles on the entire balance of the property, which will hold up an entire subdivision. So I'm continuing to let the Hamilton family use the driveway as I has always done. I'm continuing to let anybody who's adjacent neighbors park their boats, cars on that property. And I'm asking to sever the balance so I can get land titles on the balance of the property. With that land titles on the balance of the property, I can swing back around to this one lot, which is holding up 125 units, and deal with it in the court of law if necessary. So I made good offers to the Hamilton family. They'd asked originally for a shared driveway, have agreed to a shared driveway. Now they've changed their mind. So despite the impoverished plea that you've heard before you tonight, my plea with you is, let's move on with the big picture, and I'll set a little picture. We're not trying to avoid it. We're just trying to keep the ball rolling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tobey. Is there anyone else present? I'll come back to you, Sherry. Is there anyone else present who has a question or comment with regard to the proposed consent? Mr. Darrington, seems like I know everybody in here. Yeah, I know.
Most of you know me. I'm Jeff Darrington from 175 Ontario. There have been conversations in the past between myself and Steve regarding the property. When Tommy Lance passed away, that short little strip of land between my fence and the neighbor's driveway was not maintained. So I had been maintaining it for about 14 years, which I've been using it. It's been great. It's been fine. I'm a bit of a history buff. I think pretty much everybody in council knows what I like about history, and I like looking at history. And as much as Mr. Tobey talks about putting pins in things, if you go back to some of the drawings and some of the diagrams from when I worked at the county, I got to see some really nice old diagrams. The 1876 map shows the Hamilton's house, and that road beside their house is a farm lane to farm property that existed for that house way back in 1876. So as much as I'm not going to expose how old Alex is, but I know he was pretty much born there. And that road has been the farm road for that property since 1876. So I know we can't go to the archives right now and try to find out where the pins were put in the wrong place at some date that happened probably a long time ago, and probably right around the time when Division Street South closed going over the tracks. That's where the property where Tommy Lance lost his driveway, whoever was there, which was the Hasemans at the time. And the discussions happened with the road closure, where we all know from a previous development that Mr. Tobey's working on up near Iroquois, up Algonquin. So that road was closed all the way through. It just so happened they redeveloped Ontario Street, widened it, put in new infrastructure, put in power, and put in new power down that driveway to where the house was at the other end that used to have access from the south. So that was a municipal decision way back then. I can't find the information, but clearly pins weren't put in the right places necessarily then, and it wasn't a big deal. So Tommy Lance had the property. He used the driveway to get to his house that was way at the back. And because that strip was so small, it just kind of disappeared. Nobody thought about it until now. So I just like to bring forward a little bit of history lesson to everyone because there's huge history there. The history I've found even my own property and my own fence line, I'm a bit of a metal detector guy. I found an 1858 dime 2 feet from my pole. So there's a lot of history there that's gone on where pins didn't exist. So I just wanted to bring that, and looking at the property, you can't build a house there if you don't have the driveway. It's too small. Our own bylaws say how wide a driveway or a lot has to be to build. So for him to build a house, he needs to take the driveway. And to do that, if a new driveway had to be put in, you'd have to take out a 140 to 160-year-old maple tree in the front yard of the Hamilton's property. So out of all these houses that are being built, 120 here, 300 total, whatever it is, that little strip of property is by far not worth anything to the rich concept of everything else that's going on to the south of us. We put up with trucks coming in and out of that driveway and didn't say a word other than safety concerns that were brought up with people driving quickly down there over the last 3 years. And we've been pretty patient. So there's been a lot of impact to us with the building that's gone on behind our house and the access to that area before the new street went in Hamilton Woods. I just wanted to bring this consideration to council because there's a lot of history and it goes way back to 1876. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Darrington. Any other members of the public who wish to make comment? I'll come back to Mrs. Hamilton. Yep.
I'm not sure where to begin. You heard Mr. Tobey tell you that he wants to charge forward with this subdivision after waiting 3 years to address our claim. That seems, and then to describe it as he'll deal with that little bit later. You might even be feeling some of what I'm feeling, the way he poo-poos us like that. That's all I want to say. The delay in his absolute title application is the direct result of his own failure, not of the fact that we actually have a claim that should be before the Director of Titles.
Thank you, Mr. Tobey.
So Stephen Tobey, one more time. So land titles is a process. People get served with where they believe the pins are. So it's not a matter of where the pins are, it's where can we prove the pins are. And that is the process. So if we're going to get this right, we need to have some time to do it. So last December, we got a notice that people weren't, Mrs. Hamilton wasn't happy. It's a matter, not a matter of ownership. It's a matter of squatters' rights. Squatters' rights has been using the driveway. I've asked for a professional opinion on this and legal opinion on this. The opinion I get is we need time to go to the court. But moving this piece to a separate piece, we can have that time to get it right. Perhaps Mrs. Hamilton will end up with the whole piece. Perhaps she won't. In any case, it will allow the time necessary to do this without holding up the bigger picture. So it's not a matter of he said, she said, or where the pins are. It's a matter of getting it right. And that's what we're intending to do here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Tobey. I'm going to go to Mr. Harrison on Zoom. Or not. Riley?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi there. Sorry. I did have some questions that my fiance and I we did send in, and we did get a reply today from Samantha, but we're just at 18 Huron. So we would be backing on to the proposed subdivision development. So we did have a bit of questions about what the proposed infrastructure for traffic. We are quite worried that with the amount of traffic that's already been building up on Ontario, adding this new subdivision with all these houses is might be a danger to all the people that we pass by in the morning that were walking, riding bikes. So we are a bit concerned about that. We did get a response that a traffic impact report will be required. So I guess once we have further information about that, we might have further questions. My second question was more about the environmental studies, about the green space that we back onto. And it was kind of unclear. So if Mrs. Deck could give a bit more information about that, that would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mrs. Deck, could you comment on both of those questions, please?
Yes, through you, Mayor. I just want to clarify that the subdivision known as Trailside Woods is not part of this application. As of right now, we're just dealing with the lot addition. And as outlined in my email, that we do have a community open house going on next Thursday evening to look at and gain community input regarding the subdivision application. In regards to the environmental work as part of a lot addition application, it was not required. We circulated this to Lower Trent Conservation and they had no objections to the application. The lot addition application is not considered development under the PPS, so we're not required to do that environmental study. That would be dealt with at time of this subdivision in the future. So as part of this lot addition application, it's just the intended use of the severed and benefiting lot to support that future urban subdivision. But in terms of any studies, traffic, environmental, that will be dealt with at time of the subdivision.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. So, Mr. Harrison, I'm not sure if you were listening to the last consent application, but very similar to that. This is a consent application this evening. Future consideration for subdivision will be taking place. And I think you heard Mrs. Deck say that there's a public open house this Thursday at?
It's next Thursday, July 25th at 5:30 p.m. at the community center.
So here at the King Edward Park Community Center, July 25th at 5:30 p.m. And I think some of those questions can be addressed at that point.
That would be great. Yeah, we'll definitely be in attendance for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions or comments with regard to the subject application? Mrs. Hamilton.
Sorry to be a nudge here, but you have heard, I just want to correct something that Mr. Tobey said. Squatters' rights is antique. They don't exist anymore. The new language is length of adverse possession, and that is in fact what we are claiming on this property. So welcome to the new millennium. You can see that allowing a severance on this existing property would push our application to virtually unimportant again. So I would strongly, I need your help here to not let our case be pushed aside by a developer. I'm asking that this council let us have I have a solution for Mr. Tobey with the severance, convey the title and we'll sign off. There won't be a problem.
Thank you, Mrs. Hamilton. Director, did you have a comment?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I'm just want to remind council of the legal opinion that we've received as read by Ms. Deck. There was an inference that somehow that has undermined a fair process before this council, but I opine the opposite. We had two legal opinions, and for council to make its best decision, it needed its own legal opinion, and that's what staff sought. So I just want to be clear that staff was working in the best interest of the municipality and in the fairness of this process.
Thank you for the clarification. I don't think anyone in council thought otherwise, quite frankly. I understand that. You said that you had two legal opinions, one being one from the Tobeys and one from the Hamiltons. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And so we were seeking our own independent.
Yes, and we
opinion.
didn't, we were open to not proceeding with this consent if somehow it encumbered the process and implied the municipality in some disadvantaged way, and ergo the need for a legal opinion, which we've heard, and in fact that land title process can go forward independent of the consent process.
Thank you. And the legal opinion we heard this evening, read by Mrs. Deck, is the opinion of the independent legal counsel that the municipality sought.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Tobey. Mr. Tobey.
Oh, Stephen Tobey, one more time, Mayor and Council. So Mrs. Hamilton would like to solve the problem. I can assure her I would like to solve the problem too. So the way we would like to do it is sever this piece, send both ships down the road at one time. The back one is an easy one. We have that figured out. The front one, we'll get it figured out as we move along, and we'll solve the problem alongside Mrs. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Tobey. Mr. Darrington.
There was just one thing in the consent application that talked about the other address of 169 Ontario Street. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that is actually a mistake. I'll have to verify, but 169 is the home 2 doors up from me. So I don't know if that was a mistake in the paperwork, because that address actually is a house. So it's not a vacant property. So I was a little confused as to what the 169 property is. So I wanted to bring that up. I don't know if there's anyone that can answer to that here. Sadie lives in that house. It's where Stu used to live before he passed. So I'm just a little confused there.
Mrs. Deck.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, a part of the consent application, 169 Ontario was identified as the benefiting lands. So I can certainly look into that address, but it appeared in the application that 169 Ontario was the portion that the severed lands would be added to.
Thank you. It notes it's a vacant parcel. Is that correct? Or to the best of our knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Thank you. Anything further from members of the public? Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Thank you to everyone for contributing tonight. This has been very interesting, and appreciate the history lessons, and say Jeff. And Sherry, I'm very sympathetic. I understand that you see our decision tonight relieving some of the pressure off of the Tobeys to settle your case. I understand that. What I'm concerned about is that I don't want this council at a planning meeting to be sort of an intermediary for a different court. And so I think that the question that I was going to ask tonight, having read through the agenda and tried to weigh these matters myself, I was going to ask, can we get our own solicitor to give an opinion? And that was provided already, saying that these things are not a consideration that should affect the consent. So with that in mind, I feel like our planners have done their job, and I would be willing to support their proposal here.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon. Other members of council? Councillor Butwell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because I look these things up, 169 most indeed is a home. There is a vacant portion just to the south of it, 66.78 feet. So I'm guessing that that's what was likely meant, the vacant portion just to the south of 169.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley.
Well, thank you. I think Councillor Butwell just answered my question. I needed a little clarification on exactly what 169, what that parcel was like. Thank you.
Do we need to clarify the address in this application?
Through you, Mayor, as part of the lot addition application or any lot addition application at the time of transfer of deeds. Legal descriptions are verified, so we know exactly what parcel is being added to what parcel. So the subject lands map that we're seeing included as the report, and the concept plan as well. Those are the lands that we are describing as part of this. My apologies if the address is not correct, but when we're looking at the concept plan and the subject lands map, those are the lands being identified for this application brought forward this evening.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Rowley?
You, just another question or two, and maybe for all three of you who spoke earlier. Mr. Darrington, you spoke the piece of property that you said sits south of your area is not yours, but you've been maintaining it, correct? Is that kind of the comment that you made?
It is the comment he made.
It is, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
will it adversely affect your property if Mr. Tobey, develops with that? Other than the Hamiltons, I know they're obviously adversely affected regarding the driveway. How does that affect?
I mean, I have used their driveway. We've used it all the time together when we're parking our trailers. We've had friends over, they've had friends over, we've had friends over in the pool. We've used that driveway. Like I said, Mr. Tobey's been nice enough to let us park a trailer there, but I watched the grass get 3 feet high on some point and watching critters come on my property. So I just took it amongst myself to cut it just the way I am. So yes, it would affect me getting access to my property from the side up the driveway because I do have a double opener fence. So if a house did go in there, I obviously would not have that access either. I've been at the house now for 21 years this September. So I've been there for quite some time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Carry on. You have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, and just because I can't, old eyes can't get all the details. Can you tell me exactly the frontage of that piece of property? Do you know, is it in there? I'm just not being able to read exactly the numbers as clear on my report.
Mrs. Deck?
Through you, Mayor, are you looking to clarify the frontage of the retained portion? So the lands that are currently right now have that driveway. So it's a little over 14 meters.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, follow-up. Would that at some point qualify for a building lot?
Mrs. Deck?
Through you, Mayor. So at this time, this is just the consent application. So there would be a future zoning bylaw amendment application, and that would address the reduced frontage. We have seen lots created with a frontage to that regard, but at this time, it's just the consent, and the zoning would address that at a future application.
Thank you both. Anything further? Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
So we learned earlier tonight that for a roadway allowance, it needs to be 20 meters wide, and this is only 14 meters.
Mrs. Deck?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the idea that this won't ever be used as a road because it's not wide enough, because we require 20 meters for that. So the potential for a house is maybe there. It'd be a crazy skinny house, but there is that. Given the long history, and I've got the 1876 map in my hallway, and I know I can see the property there and how long it goes back. Other than potentially being a lot for a potential home, Mr. Tobey, what other use do you foresee in this?
Again, at this stage, we're just dealing with a consent.
I know,
So
I
we're trying to future gaze here, I think.
Yeah.
Mr. Tobey, if you want to answer, you may.
Stephen Tobey again, and Jeff, thanks for cutting the grass for all these years, buddy. Again, the land titles process needs to happen, right? So in order for it to happen, I have to have all surrounding land orders in order. So I think Samantha's right in that this is just a consent application for a severance so that land titles can carry on, not negating the need to solve the land titles in this at exactly the same time or in a slightly longer fashion. So in the long-term process of what the thing could be used for, there are some possibilities of some potential skinny houses. There's some possible potential parking lots for Jeff's trailers. So other than that, we don't have any plans right now. Okay.
Councillor Wright.
I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna anyways, because that's just who I am. And I do this, and I say this with all due respect, given the long history of this driveway that's been used on this property for probably well over 70 years at least. Is there any hope that you could potentially give the Hamiltons that portion and then everybody's happy?
Yeah, it's a matter of a court of law, if I can put it that way. So it's one ownership and one user, longtime user. We've acknowledged that. They've made a claim based on longtime usage. So I think it's a matter for the court to solve it out. And when the court solves it out, just I seek legal opinion as we go along, obviously. I'm going to head down a road and heading to the end and there's nothing there. So because of the long-term use, there is a right to use it. So if this was to be something more than just an entire parking lot for Jeff's trailers and Mrs. Hamilton's access to her side property, there could potentially be some development potential there, but that's down the road. And so as far as Mrs. Hamilton entering her property, I've offered that. I've offered a full access across there as a deeded access, and they've declined, which is exactly what they asked for. So I think we're at the court now.
I'm going to allow Mrs. Hamilton to respond to that, and then I'm going to say this. This council is not to be involved in neighborhood disputes.
Right. This is about, can we sever it so we can move on?
Exactly.
That's where we're
So-
at tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Tobey. We'll let Mrs. Hamilton have the floor. And just a reminder to members of council, we should not be engaging in a neighborhood dispute. This is for the courts to figure out if that's where they want to go, or for the neighbors to figure out if they choose to do it that way. This is not something that this council should be engaged in. We should be focused on the consent in front of us and the information we've been provided. Mrs. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. And you are correct. This should never have come before this council before it went to the Director of Land Titles. There's absolutely no way you should be considering to sever off a piece that's in dispute. A piece of land that has encumbrances on it should not be coming for council at all. It absolutely should not be happening. The Director of Titles should be speaking to this first before it ever comes before this council. But I would like to correct, the reason that I got back up again is because no offer like what he just described was ever made to us. Okay, that is actually not true. And then the last thing I want to say is I apologize to staff, but when I spoke to Samantha Deck last week, she told me that the reason that this was coming before council was based on an opinion from the applicant's lawyer. I mentioned the bias. She was adamant that they had high ethics, but not once did she tell me that there was another opinion from the municipality solicitor. So I'd be curious to know when that was achieved. But for sure, the misinformation that's coming my way in terms of telling you that we were made an offer that we were never made, and not disclosing that a municipal counselor was used to, or a municipal lawyer was used for an opinion. How confusing is this for me when I'm really just waiting for my day in court?
Thank you. Mrs. Deck.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, we didn't have the legal opinion at the time that Ms. Hamilton did come into the office. But we did reach out to the municipal solicitor and did receive the legal opinion a few days ago. So at the time, the writing of the report, I did not have that legal opinion, but I did just receive it.
Thank you. Councillor Butwell.
Through the chair to Mrs. Deck. That's not in this package, correct? It is? No,
Mrs.
it's
Deck.
not.
No, the legal opinion I did not have at the time of the writing of the report, so I did not get it in time to be able to include it as an attachment to the report.
Would you be able to circulate it to members of council by email, please?
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Rowley?
Just to be reminded, the Ms. Deck, some of the commentary in that legal opinion that you got did say that it should not affect this consent application.
Mrs. Deck?
Through you, Mayor, yes.
Correct. One more question.
Yeah, I'll just read the last line for the back into the record again. However, this is the last line of the legal opinion read earlier. However, this is not a concern to the municipality and does not serve as an impediment to allow the consent application to proceed at this time. Councillor Rowley.
Okay, one question. I just lost my question. Just a minute. At this particular point, this piece that we're discussing is owned by Mr. Tobey.
I think to the best of everybody's knowledge, that is true.
Right. It's part of that whole package. Just want to make sure it is owned by Mr. Tobey. Just a little bit of dispute with his neighbors. That's all.
That is correct. Anything further, Councillor Butwell?
Through the chair, and I don't know to whom, what kind of delays could be expected for the Hamiltons and Mr. Tobey in proceeding with this consent application? Does it actually push it down the list? If somebody could, for them to hear it, for the court to hear it, for the director of,
You may not. Director, do you have an answer?
I think the motive to have the consent and lot addition is twofold. One, to consolidate lands for the intended future subdivision, and therefore facilitating the land titles absolute process that's about 6 to 9 months long, or can be, or longer. And however, it would not make a difference that, at least what we're hearing, it would make a difference in the speed of the land titles absolute process for resolving the Hamilton claim on the land. So it's independent of the consent process. So the consent's not going to alter that time frame, is my understanding.
Follow up?
Follow up, please. Thank you. So from what I heard, thank you, Director, that in your estimation, the Hamiltons and the Tobey should be heard, have their item heard within 6 to 9 months, roughly, just anecdotally?
Well, I think the claim is independent of, as we've heard, the consent application. So the land title is absolute, it'll be about 6 to 9 months. What the process for a claim by Hamilton on the property, that's a time frame that's really up to the courts in terms of their prioritization on their dockets. It's not same as the land title's absolute process.
And additional follow-up? Has this item been filed? It has not been filed. So it has not been filed yet.
We're hearing it has not been filed.
It is not. May I ask then on the record if it's been filed?
Mr. Tobey?
We need to have the separate property to file it. End of story. If not, it holds the whole process up.
Okay.
Mrs. Hamilton,
All right.
this back and forth is unnecessary. It's straightforward. Give me a second piece of property. I'll solve it with Mrs. Hamilton. I give her exactly what she's asking for. I'll solve it. Just give me the 2 pieces of property.
Thank you, Mr. Tobey. You and Mr. Tobey can have that conversation offline. Thank you. Councillor Fredis? No? Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Does council wish to make a decision on this consent this evening? Yeah. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council receive the staff report dated July 17th, 2024 regarding the subject application for 175A Ontario Street and 169 Ontario Street being consent application B11, 2024. And further, that council grants provisional consent to application B11, 2024, subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing. Confirmation from the applicant's solicitor that the severed and benefiting lands will merge on title. The solicitor for the applicant shall submit an undertaking to the municipality to the following effect. I hereby personally undertake to prepare and register an application to consolidate parcels for those lands being the severed lands herein and those lands being the benefiting lands herein, and provide to the municipality the registered application to consolidate parcels as soon as possible after the registration of the severance, transfer, and designation of the new PIN to the severed lands. That subsections 3 and 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, shall apply to any subsequent conveyance of or transaction involving the conveyed lands. That the proponent applies for an open cut permit for the purposes for and including all works to install new water and sanitary service laterals, including full service restoration between the service mains and property lines to the retained lot to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works at no cost to the municipality. Existing or encroaching water and sanitary services shall be decommissioned at the main or relocated wholly within the frontage of the benefiting lot. That a preliminary grading, servicing, and drainage plan for the retained lands is submitted to the satisfaction of the manager of capital infrastructure. That the proponent enters into a site plan agreement that details servicing and grading to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works on the retained lot. At the applicant's cost, sufficient land be conveyed by registered transfer to the municipality of Brighton along the frontage of the severed and benefiting lands for the widening of the road allowance to a minimum of 15 meters from the center line along Ontario Street or its planned width inclusive of any associated traveled areas, shoulders, or drainage works. The conveyances referenced in condition H above shall be clear of any liens or encumbrances, all to the satisfaction of the manager of operations. All taxes on each of the lots be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. A digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. The surveyor deposit with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained lands submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality, and the owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for use of the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. Our next item in the statutory public meeting is with regard to zoning bylaw amendment application file Z10 2023 at 406 County Road 64. The agent is Spencer Hutchison and the applicants are Norman and Karine Mackenzie. The purpose of the public meeting is to request a decision from council on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to the Municipality of Brighton's comprehensive zoning bylaw 140/2002 as amended. Mrs. Deck, by what method and on what date was notice of the zoning bylaw amendment application given?
Notice of the zoning bylaw amendment application was sent by mail on June 26, 2024 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a sign notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
The zoning bylaw amendment Z10 2023 would revise the existing special agricultural 35 A35 zone at 406 County Road 64 to permit a special event facility within the existing barn and to allow 2 guest rooms and an accessory building being the existing converted drive shed. All environmental features currently zoned environmental protection EP would remain. The zoning bylaw amendment would establish new definitions and regulations for the special event facility, including lot coverage, number of guests, frequency of event, and parking regulations. The proposed revised special agricultural 35 zone would, in addition to the uses permitted in the agricultural zone, add the permitted uses of special event facility, gathering area special event, large-scale special event, and small-scale special event. Staff have received public comments from an adjacent property owner and the Northumberland Federation of Agriculture regarding traffic, impact on agricultural operations, and how the limitation and frequency of events will be monitored. Staff have also received a letter of support from a neighboring property owner for the proposed special event facility. The comments from the adjacent property owner have been addressed through email regarding the impact on agricultural operations and Northumberland Federation of Agriculture letter. The landowner has acknowledged and appreciates the surrounding agricultural activities and has outlined that any event attendees understand that normal farming practices will occur during the event season. The site plan provisions notes will include clauses where the owner acknowledges that the special event facility shall not object to normal farming practices. The recommendation for this evening is to defer the subject application to ensure that all public comments are received and addressed and to allow the County of Northumberland to provide comments on the subject application.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Mr. Hutchison.
Good evening. My name is Spencer Hutchison. I'm a land use planner of over 35 years in Eastern Ontario, and it's been an interesting evening from my perspective. The applicants are overseas. I do see them on the Zoom before me and behind you, so they would like an opportunity to speak in due course, but they are out of the country tonight. I also believe the architect who's looked at the barn is here or on Zoom. Again, that may be premature, talking about the structure and that. And there are people, I believe, in the audience who wish to speak in support. And I believe the neighboring farming operation is represented here tonight as well. I thank staff for all the time and effort they've put into this. It's been a rather complex question. I thought this was pretty easy. We've got a barn, we're going to use it. Not for agriculture, but for some other use. But then we got into the complexity of paperwork, regulations, farmland, etc. I would suggest this issue, if I call it an issue, dated back to when the farmlands were separated off from the home farm and the three accessory buildings to the south. So a 3.8 acre parcel was created by severance approved by the municipality so that the farmlands could go and be farmed and consolidated. And that's a regular process that we see all across Northumberland and other jurisdictions. The only slight difference, usually when you do that, it's only the farmhouse that stays behind. You know, the farmer wants to farm. He doesn't want to be a tenant or a landlord. But in this case, in your package, you'll see there's, you know, a very solid barn and a smaller barn and a drive shed. And so the applicants, you know, they've got this 3 acres with these barns that are in good shape, but would like them put them to use. Provincially, county-wise, we have what's called farm diversified uses. And that's where farming lands can do diversified uses to help with income. And the Brighton official plan talks to it as well. And it lists the criteria. And a example is farm weddings. So if there was a farm, we wouldn't be here. The issue is we have the land without the farmland. Therefore, that's where we're going through this process. I would be as simple to say, if this barn was 60 feet north on the field, no application tonight. It's because we don't have a farming operation with the barn. We're a little disappointed that the county needs more time to provide comments, but there is a county road involved, and sometimes due diligence for 30 days, as we've seen earlier tonight, is well worth it. The other issue is the compatibility with the farm uses. I understand that the applicants have had a conversation with the neighboring farming operation. Mrs. Deck referred to the page and a bit email, I guess a page and a bit when all the answers were put in there, which tried to alleviate the questions. And I acknowledged her email and said, we 100% realized the farm was there first. Farming is paramount in this area. But we don't believe what we're asking for is going to be in a conflict. And we recognize they were first. I mean, we could sit here and say, we got a racetrack going the other way, that it's not quiet when you're having a wedding on a weekend. So, we're not saying, they're there first, farming operations first. Having said that, as you would be all aware and would have come across on other applications, the province looks after farm problems, compatibility through MDS. And I'm sure in other applications, you've dealt with MDS. And that's the provincial formula to try and negate incompatibility. And I want to say there's two parts to MDS. There's MDS 1, which is for new houses and sensitive uses to locate near a farming operation. And there is MDS 2, which is for new barns and facilities near sensitive use. So there's two parts to MDS. And so the neighbors and the people who live on Bowes Road and County Road 64 and the farm operation are all in this sort of balance that each, through MDS, sort of regulates what each can do. That the fields to the north are fields, but I don't know how much further they can go because of MDS 2. So we ran a calculation. We were asked by the municipality, and in your package, we looked at a property further west on County Road 64, and we met with the owner and got the details of her property and what she did, and we submitted the formula from the software that the province created that shows that activity to the west is met and is not an issue. I could be corrected, but I sort of double checked on Google and when I drove across this afternoon or this evening, I believe this property is 1.4 kilometers from the buildings on the south side of County Road 2 up by the railway tracks, which is a substantial distance when you come to MDS. I mean, it's way, and the other thing, it's north and east, which is downwind of it. I'm sure we'll hear in a few minutes other concerns. Like I say, the applicants are here. There's some other people here. I will stop at that point unless there's any immediate questions and turn it over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchison. Does council have any questions of Mr. Hutchison at this stage? Thank you, sir. I'm sure you'll be available should we. I get it. Are there any other persons present who have questions or comments? Come on up. There you go.
What a clever label. So first of all, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak. Introductions, I am Ryan McLeod, and I'm here representing Huck Steaks Poultry Farm, which is the adjacent farmland that you've been already referred to. Very proud to say that we have 3 generations of farming in this community. And I'm even more proud to say that there's a 4th generation coming up that's showing a keen interest in agriculture already. So we're not going anywhere anytime soon. When we first learned of this proposed bylaw amendment, we felt we had to oppose it. Through a lot of consideration on our farm and discussion, and through a ton of work that's been done by the municipality, which we are extremely grateful for, our minds have been opened. So we wish to extend our thanks to the municipality for the various restrictions and limitations in this bylaw amendment, because it's clear to us that agriculture is a priority, and we're very grateful for that. As I stated, I'm representing a local farm. Not only are we a local farm, but when you consider that all of the land surrounding the property in question is agricultural, we are the vast majority of that land. We are farming the vast majority of it. So obviously we have a specific interest in what happens in this area. Given our close proximity to this property, We made an effort to build a positive relationship with the current owners that you see here on Zoom. And we feel that they have done a good job in maintaining a good relationship with us. They've been very transparent about their intentions, and we're grateful to them for that. We would say that our concern comes down to future owners. As I said, we are 3 generations of farming with a 4th generation on the way, and we're not going anywhere. The current owners, who knows how long, once this business is up and running, they may stick around. So with that in mind, and we're happy to hear that you're deferring this, because I did feel a little bad that I didn't get this to you beforehand. But with that in mind, we would like to request that the following restriction be added should the bylaw amendments be passed. And that restriction is that special events hosted at this property cannot interfere with regular farming practices as defined by Ontario Farming and Food Protection Act 1998. With the acceptance of this restriction, we would support the bylaw amendment. Without the acceptance of this restriction, we would have to oppose it because we have no idea what future owners might bring to this area and how they might view agriculture. As I said, we have kids that may want to farm that we have to protect. We feel that farming and community must be able to coexist, and that is why we're here. And that is why we have given a lot of time and discussion to this issue, because we don't want to just be the people who say, no way, not on my watch. We want to coexist with our community. That's paramount to us. Just as an aside, in addition to the main concern, a few things that we think warrant mentioning. Perhaps a traffic study of Bowes Road would be advisable should this get passed. The fact is the business is going to increase local traffic. I'm sure many of you know that there has been an increase in agriculture-related road accidents. I don't know if you know what a buddy seat is. It's a seat about yay big in the tractor, and that's where we would put our kids typically, and that's how they learn to drive tractors. A lot of farmers are getting very scared to take their kids along because of the way we are being treated on the roads. Increased traffic is something we can't ignore. And I assure you, if you're behind me in a tractor, I'm either rushing to the field so I can get the work done and get home, or I'm trying to get home to my family too. So I have just as much of an interest in moving quickly on the roads, and I'm very literally going as fast as I can. We strongly agree with some of the recommendations in the application, one such being that the driveway entrance be widened to 2 lanes to mitigate traffic turning in and out. This would obviously impact us. And then potentially a right turning lane on 64 at Bowes Road. This would also limit some of the traffic and impact. We're not city planners. And we would obviously respect whatever findings come out of the traffic study should you decide to do one. But the conclusion and the takeaway here is we will not oppose this bylaw amendment if the following restriction is added. And I will state again, special events hosted at this property cannot interfere with regular farming practices as defined by the Ontario Farming and Food Protection Act 1998. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. Members of staff, is that a restriction that we feel that we could add? Director?
Yes, staff have discussed that. And the intent is that at time of site plan control, having an acknowledgement statement almost verbatim to what Mr. McLeod has presented.
So it wouldn't have to be part of the zoning bylaw amendment? It could be included in the site plan control?
Yes, better in that where it's an explicit acknowledgement statement, and the zoning doesn't, and the act doesn't quite work that way. So we'd have to get it into the site plan undertaking as a note or agreement as if it's a full agreement.
And then that would follow the property on title, so to speak?
Yes, it would.
Thank you. Okay.
If we register it as a full agreement, we were speaking of doing it as a site plan undertaking, in which case it's a note on that. It has same effect as the site plan under the act. It depends how robust the offset works and things like that are going forward, that we get into the fullness of an agreement as may be needed. If fullness of an agreement is not needed, we don't tend to have something that's registered. But in the interest of having it given notice to future owners as per the delegation request, then I think maybe we better acknowledge that concern and have it in a registerable form.
I would agree with you, and so I appreciate that. Mr. McLeod, are you comfortable with that moving forward? Yeah, okay, thank you. Yep, this is the time, Kirby. Could you push the purplish button in front of you there? There you go.
Kirby Huckestake. Yeah, one of the partners at Huckestake Poultry Farm Limited. Just wanted to make aware of what Mr. Hutchison talked about MDS, and he is fully correct. We are almost kitty corner, opposite corner of basically the Bowes Road corner. I would like to clarify just a wee little bit that once this becomes a business opportunity for the opponents here, that becomes a commercial identity. So moving forward in terms of future expansion or building another barn on another site, that then becomes MDS ×2. So just as long as we're aware of that, that's MDS ×2, not MDS ×1. So that will impact us a little bit greater in terms of where we potentially could put another barn. And then with this whole traffic potentials, I'd love for something to be done about the width of that road in terms of site turning from Bowes Road onto, as if that's going to get looked at, that's perfectly fine. It is a deterrent around that corner. The visuality of well, I don't care whether you're driving a car or a tractor or a truck, the visuality of turning left is cumbersome.
As you're southbound on Bowes Road onto 64?
Absolutely, 100%. It's that needs to get looked at, or you're going to be dealing with some accidents.
Can we have a conversation tomorrow sometime, Kirby? Because County Road 64 is about to be reconstructed in that portion of the area, so it would be probably ideal to have that conversation
100%.
2 years ago, but now is better than later.
100%, but I think you have my cell number.
I do have your cell number, yes. I'm pretty sure you text me. Thank you, Mr. Huckestake. Anything further from members of the public? The proponents on Zoom, but you have to tell us where you are, Karine. You're still muted. No. 5 hours ahead. Yeah, I know. You can ask her to unmute, but she has to do it herself.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, there you go.
We are in Edinburgh. Heading home tomorrow.
I knew that.
Visiting grandchildren. And then this came up. So thank you for taking this up tonight. We just wanted to state a couple of things. So we bought the property and it was severed off of that farm. So we are situated in the middle of their farm on either side, but it's also our home. And we've been trying to improve the property in many ways. Again, we have Mr. Bowes' legacy, really, with those barns and the farmhouse and all of that jazz. Those barns will not stay standing unless some serious money is put towards them. And we don't have the money just to fix the barns out of the goodness of our heart. So we're trying to generate some income to help us with the maintenance of those barns. This is not going to be a giant wedding facility. This is a 100-person maximum as the restrictions that have been put on us on the weekends only. I would think that the farming isn't going to be happening on a Saturday. I might be wrong. I'm not familiar entirely with farming practices. And we've had a great relation.
You can't hear it, Karine, because people are laughing. But farming happens when it's not raining, period. I mean, that's
Okay.
how it goes.
All right. But well, no, we've had a great relationship so far. It's been great. We've been given a heads up, and that's all we're really asking for. You know, we want to be good neighbors. We want to work with them. So that's not an issue in from our perspective. You know, in terms of lots of traffic, people are probably going to be staying at Airbnbs in the area. So we'll be helping the rest of the small short-term rentals in the area. And I'm hoping to have a sort of a shuttle service from those short-term rentals. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a ton of cars. It's a Saturday afternoon when traffic's not really horrendous. We know about the turning issue onto Bowes Road from 64. Our driveway is a permanent U-turn, and we'd like to put a toll booth in there so we can get some money out of that. But we know that I don't think this is going to be the big operation that everybody thinks it's going to be. And whether it's us or future owners, it's all in writing. And I know they're planning to stay in the area, but you know, something could change their mind too. They could get a nice big package, and one day it'll be different, right? So right now we're just facing who's going to be the owners, and that's us. And we want to work in the community and support it. That's it.
That's good.
Thank you. So appreciate the comments. And my question to you then is, you heard that there's a request for an additional restriction at site plan. Are you okay with that?
I don't think it, yeah, I would imagine.
There's nothing that we would do that would impact anything they're doing.
So adding that restriction makes no difference to you at the end of the day?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. It's 1:30 in the morning in Edinburgh, so I appreciate that you're still with us, quite frankly, because I don't do 1:30 anymore, I can tell you. And anything further from members of the public? Members of council? Councilor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Really love to hear all of the conversation about neighborliness. That's incredible. The laws only exist as a backstop to neighborliness. And so that's fantastic to hear. I know Trent Hills had a case of diversified farm use proposal that got shot down last week. It was actually a split. There were only 6 councillors in the room, and so it was defeated on a tie. But it was for a similar type of situation, although it was on an active farm. And the comments that I read in their agenda from neighbors came to me really spoke of there was a lack of communication, there was a lack of that neighborliness. And so I was a little bit worried when I saw this one on the agenda, because I thought, uh-oh, is ours going to be like theirs was? And it has not been. This is awesome to hear. I learned a lot about MDS last year, and I actually learned most of it from Mr. Hutchison. So thank you, Spencer, for that. He tutored me out of the goodness of his heart. And I know that there are rules in place that do protect agricultural activities. Having it on title is just another layer of protection that makes a lot of sense to me. I've been to this venue and was given a tour, and I think it would be a wonderful place to get married. I'm not going to do that again, but I think it would be a great business in the community. Really pleased to see how this is shaking out.
Thank you, Councilor Wheeldon. Councilor Rowley.
Thank you. And although not at this venue, but our daughter got married in a place very similar to this several years ago. And it is wonderful. And it is nice to see that Brighton might get something special like this as well in the near future. I do have a question for Ms. Deck. Recommendation number 2 also includes an objection that has been received, and I don't believe that we have that in our package. That's fine. I'm sure if it needs to be public, we'll get that at some point. Is that something that has already been taken care of, or are you still waiting to solve that issue as well?
Mrs. Deck.
Through you, Mayor. It was actually with the adjacent poultry farm. I believe it was Angela who I spoke with. And I did have comments that I sent back to her, and she did seem to be satisfied with those comments. So it was just some public comments that I wanted to make sure were addressed, and probably noting that they would be here this evening. We did wanted to defer it just to make sure that the public was happy with something that we were bringing forward for a decision in the future.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank
That's
you both.
cleared that up. So now we're just waiting for commentary from the county.
Through you, Mary. Yes, the county, it's a little bit, because we do have the County Road 64 road that we do have the roads department involved, as well as planning comments as well. So we just want to give them the time to appropriately review this application, because it is new for Brighton. So a little bit of a few different layers to it. They just want to make sure that they have appropriate time to provide comments before we have a decision in front of council.
And fair enough, I called Director Walsh today to find out when the county received the application so they could review, because I was already getting, my ire up about it, and he said, no, we need to give them time. So I was like, all right. I'll get angry about something else. Councillor Wright.
I've been hearing about this project for quite some time during my own renovations. So I'm quite excited to see this come to the table for approval. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for a really lovely little venue for this. And it's going to just add some extra charm to Brighton. So I'm looking forward to this coming back for proper decision.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? I would just echo Councillor Wheeldon's comments, in particular to Hackesteg Poultry Farm and your team for working with the municipality and your neighbors. I always knew you could. But no, it's
You've got a gem of an operation there that is self-tracked, and come down and have a look what's going on.
maybe we'll organize a little local farm tour, since I'm not able to do the larger Northumberland farm tour this year. How's that sound? I think that's a good idea, and maybe we'll get our economic development team to work on that for us. Thank you, Kirby. Appreciate that. So one more time, anything further from members of council? Mrs. Deck, any final comments?
Not at this time.
Does council wish to make a decision, which includes a deferral, this evening? I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the staff report dated July 17th, 2024 regarding the subject application for 406 County Road 64, being zoning bylaw amendment application file number Z10 2023, and further that council defers the enactment of the zoning bylaw amendment as shown on attachment 6 of this report to the following council planning meeting as requested by the County of Northumberland Planning Department, and to allow staff to review the objection that has been received. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Good night, Mackenzies.
Good night. We fly in the morning, so we better go to bed.
Boy.
Bye-bye.
Safe travels. Yeah.
Thanks.
The next item in our statutory public meeting is consent file number B07 2024 and zoning bylaw amendment application file Z04 2024. This is at, well, it's not really 0 Whites Road. It's at a property on Whites Road and 398 Whites Road. The agent is Spencer Hutchison and the applicant is Cecil McQuoid. The purpose of this evening's of this item in the statutory public meeting is to request a decision from council on the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment to the municipality of Brighton Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 140/2002 as amended. Mrs. Deck, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent zoning bylaw amendment applications given?
Notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment application was sent by mail on June 26, 2024 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a signed notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment?
The purpose of consent application B07 2024 is to sever a 7 hectare, sorry, I was looking at, my apologies. It's past my bedtime. a 7-hectare or a 17.29 acre portion of the property located at 0 Whites Road, and add it to the rural property located at 398 Whites Road. The application will result in the retained lands on Whites Road having a total lot frontage of approximately 0.4 hectares or 1.09 acres, with 45 meters of frontage on Whites Road. The purpose of zoning bylaw amendment application Z04 2024 will ensure that there is consistent zoning amongst the properties after the lot addition is applied. The zoning bylaw amendment application serves to rezone 398 Whites Road from the rural zone to the rural exception number 66 RU66 zone to capture the existing use of the barn and to outline that the existing barn is to be used only for dry storage and not for the housing of livestock. The zoning bylaw amendment application serves to rezone the portion of the severed property to be added to 398 Whites Road from the rural exception number 10 zone to the rural exception number 66 zone to ensure consistent zoning with the benefiting property. All environmental features currently zoned EP will remain, and the retained parcel is to be rezoned from the rural exception number 10 zone to the rural residential zone in order to address the reduced lot size and associated permitted uses.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment? Mr. Hutchison.
Thank you very much. Mayor Sweeten's support of the staff report. Mr. McQuoid is aware of it, the conditions, no disagreement. And unless there's any questions, it's getting on an hour here. So we support staff's recommendation and hope council will endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else present who has a question or comment on this consent and zoning bylaw amendment application? Anyone on Zoom? Members of council? Any final comments, Mrs. Deck?
None at this time, Mayor.
Does council wish to make a decision this evening? I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the staff report dated July 17th, 2024 regarding the subject applications for 0 Whites Road and 398 Whites Road being consent application B07 2024 and zoning bylaw amendment application file number Z04 2024. And further, that council enacts a bylaw to rezone portions of 398 Whites Road from the rural zone to the rural exception number 66 zone, rezone the severed portion of the lands to be added to 398 Whites Road from rural exception number 10 zone to the rural exception number 66 zone, and to rezone the retained parcel from the rural exception number 10 zone to the rural residential zone. And further, that council grants provisional consent to application B07 2024, subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. That application for zoning bylaw amendment Z04 2024 is finally approved. Confirmation from the applicant's solicitor that the severed and benefiting lands will merge on title. The solicitor for the applicant shall submit an undertaking to the municipality to the following effect. I hereby personally undertake to prepare and register an application to consolidate parcels for those lands being the severed lands herein and those lands being the benefiting lands herein, and provide to the municipality the registered application to consolidate parcels as soon as possible after the registration of the severance, transfer, and designation of the new PIN to the severed lands. That subsections 3 and 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, shall apply to any subsequent conveyance of or transaction involving the conveyed lands. That the applicant applies for and is approved for an entrance permit for the retained lot to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. The owner submit a letter of opinion from a qualified hydrological engineer, professional engineer, indicating where and how septics and wells are to be installed on the retained lot, consistent with MECP guidelines D5.4 and D5.5. Prior to undertaking a hydrological review, the owner's engineer will consult and receive direction from the municipality's hydrogeological engineer consultant. The municipal costs of the consultant will be borne by the owner. An Ontario land surveyor shall confirm Whites Road to have a minimum of 10 meters in width from its physical center line along the frontage of the retained and benefiting lots. If it has a lesser width, that the applicant's cost sufficient land be conveyed by registered transfer to the municipality of Brighton, along the frontage of the retained lands for widening of the road allowance to a minimum of 10 meters from the center line along White's Road or its planned width, inclusive of any associated traveled areas, shoulders, or drainage works. The conveyances referenced in condition H above shall be clear of any liens or encumbrances, all to the satisfaction of the manager of operations. All taxes on each of the lots be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. A digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. The OLS indicate in writing to the Department of Planning and Development that no encroachments of driveways, wells, or septic systems will result from lot additions or conveyances. The surveyor deposit with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained land submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. And the owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for use for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? And as I was reading that, I was recalling back when I first started in this job, it would be amazing to have even 5 conditions on these severances, but here we are. I was just, I was just reminiscing. I was reminiscing as I read many words. All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And thank you for your indulgence on that one. The next item in our statutory public meeting is consent file number B23, 2023, and zoning bylaw amendment application file Z11, 2023. The location is 140 Smith Street. The agent is EcoVue Consulting Services, and the applicant is Gail Grant. The purpose of the public meeting is to request a decision from council on the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment to the Municipality of Brighton Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 140, 2002 as amended. And Mrs. Deck, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment application given?
Notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment application was sent by mail on June 26, 2024 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a signed notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment?
The purpose of consent application B23, 2023 is to sever the property at 140 Smith Street to create a new rural residential lot intended for a single detached dwelling. The proposed severed lands will have a lot area of approximately 0.81 hectares or 2 acres with a lot frontage of 50.40 meters on Smith Street. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment Z11, 2023 is to rezone the severed lot created by consent application B23, 2023 from the rural zone to the rural residential zone in order to adjust the reduced lot size and associated permitted uses. The retained lands from consent application B23, 2023 will continue to meet or exceed the standards of the rural zone with the resource reserve area zone and flood prone area zone overlays.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent zoning bylaw amendment? On Zoom?
Well, that was a long wait. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aditya Srinivas. I'm a planner at EcoVue Consulting. I'm representing Ms. Gail Grant, who's both the client and the landowner for 140 Smith Street. I'm the agent for this application, so I can answer any questions that the council or the public may have. We've gone through the conditions of consent and we're in agreement with all of them.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Come on up. There you go.
Yes, I live at 190 Smith Street across the road from where the Grants want to build a house. North of or east of them, there's 5 homes.
Could you just introduce yourself for the record, please?
Dan Balich.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay. There's 5 houses. There's 2 empty lots and 3 houses already built right by where the Grants are. We're across the street from the Grants. We have absolutely no issues having them build a house there. We welcome to have young children on the street, and they've done a fabulous job preparing preparing the land, putting in a driveway, and everything he's done has been first class. So he grew up in the property. I fully support him building a house, and I hope the council will allow him to get on with this so we can have Tara and the other girls across the street from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balich. Come on up. One more time. There you go.
My name is Ann McDonald. I live at 190 Smith Street. I also would like to recommend that this severance be allowed. The Grant family has lived next door to me for as long as I've been in Brighton. They've been there for probably 100 years prior to that. If he wants to build a house on the land that he grew up on, and he wants to raise his children on the land that he grew up on, he should certainly be permitted to do it. It's not like he's asking to build a subdivision on that farmland. That I would vehemently oppose. He's looking for one house. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from members of the public? Members of council? Any final comments, Mrs. Deck?
Not at this time, Mayor.
Does council wish to make a decision? I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the staff report dated July 17th, 2024 regarding the subject applications for 140 Smith Street, being consent application B23, 2023, and zoning bylaw amendment application file numbers at 11, 2023, and further that council enacts a bylaw to rezone portions of the severed lands from the rural zone to the rural residential zone, and further that council grants provisional consent to application B23, 2023, subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. That application for zoning bylaw amendment Z11, 2023 is finally approved. At the applicant's cost, sufficient land be conveyed by registered transfer to the municipality of Brighton along the frontage for widening of the road allowance to a minimum of 10 meters from each side of the center line of the physical occupation of Smith Street, inclusive of any associated travel areas, shoulders, or drainage works, all to the satisfaction of the manager of operations. At the applicant's cost, sufficient land be conveyed by registered transfer to the municipality along the frontage for the widening of the road allowance to a minimum of 13 meters from the center line along John Street, inclusive of any associated traveled areas, shoulders, or drainage works, all to the satisfaction of the manager of operations. The conveyances referenced in conditions C and D above shall be clear of any liens or encumbrances, all to the satisfaction of the manager of operations. That a building permit under the Ontario Building Code be applied for to change the use of the barn to dry storage only. That cash in lieu of parkland be paid to the municipality, an amount equal to 5% of the appraised value of the subject lands, in compliance with the municipality's parkland dedication bylaw number 110, 2023. That the OLS indicate in writing to the Director of Planning and Development that no encroachments of wells or septics will result from the new lot being created. That the applicant applies for and is approved for an entrance permit to convert the existing yellow Civic plate to a blue Civic plate for 181 Smith Street to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. That all taxes on each of the lots be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. A digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. The surveyor deposit with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained lands submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. And the owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for the use for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Just one question, Mayor, please. You're looking for frontage for widening of the road allowance to a minimum of 13 meters. Normally we see 10. Can you clarify that for me, please?
Mrs. Deck?
Through you, Mayor, I believe this was a comment from Public Works, but I believe it's in regards to the official land designation for the road, in which we'll see a little bit of a larger frontage. Or sorry, road widening.
And this is from the center line of the John Street Road allowance, FYI, right?
That's correct. So the road allowance that goes north-south on the westerly flank of the subject lands is essentially an extension of John Street from the south and be a connection up to Georgina. So in the pending master transportation plan, that's a future collector road. And collector roads have a wider right-of-way width than a typical local. And particularly when you're going through sloped areas, you need the extra width as well.
Okay, understand that. Is this connected to the parcel of where this building is going to be? You say it's on the total west end of the farm?
Not the building, but the parcel.
The parcel.
The
correct.
parcel at the very west end.
Right, so the west end, does that have an effect on that? Okay.
Yes.
It's the subject lands, and
Yeah.
that's how the conditions get applied to both the severed and retained essentially.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions from members of council? There was some concern with the ownership of the road we know as Smith Street. Has that been dealt with?
It will be through the conditions.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. And that ends a very long statutory public meeting with a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council move out of the statutory public meeting July 17th, 2024 at 9:01 p.m. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And that brings us to planning and development reports. Let's take a 5-minute recess, shall we? Yeah. So it's 9:03, sorry, it's 9:01. We'll reconvene at, anyone need more than 5? 9:06 p.m. All right, it's 9:06 still. I'll call this meeting back to order. We'll move into planning and development reports. First report is with regard to application for Bond Road official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and consents. Files are OPA 02 2023, Z08 2023, and B1015 2023. The applicant is 2731008 Ontario Inc., the location part of lots 30, 31, and 32, concession A. Mr. Warren, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will simply add that it's substantially similar to the report that was prepared back in November with similar recommendations. The update we were waiting on was Lower Trent Conservation Authority's confirmation on the environmental impact study that was provided, and it just provided that extra confirmation of the schedules we have for the official plan and the zoning bylaw amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. The motion is moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council receives the staff report regarding applications to amend the Municipality of Brighton official plan. Zoning bylaw number 140/2002 was amended, and for consents intended for the creation of 6 lots as prepared by staff. Council adopt official plan amendment number 17, which will redesignate portions of the subject lands from the aggregate resource to rural and environmental protection designations, as well as classifying its active pit designation to inactive pit as identified in this report. The council enacts a bylaw to rezone the subject lands rural, rural residential, and environmental protection zones as appropriate and identified in this report. And that council grants provisional consent for the subject severance applications B10 through B15 2023, subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. That the application for zoning bylaw amendment Z08 2023 is finally approved. That all taxes on the lots be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. That cash in lieu of parkland based on 5% of a recent land appraisal or sale be paid to the municipality. That applications for entrance permits for the severed lots are submitted and approved by the municipality. That a digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. The surveyor deposit with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained land submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. The owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. That GIS shape files of all field verified wetlands are provided to Lower Trent Conservation and the municipality of Brighton to ensure regulatory mapping can be appropriately updated. The applicant enter into a consent development agreement with the municipality that implements the conclusion and recommendations of the environmental impact study as accepted by Lower Trent Conservation Authority and the municipality of Brighton. And that consent is subject to the outcomes and recommendations of the record of site condition contaminated site assessment report as shall be referenced in a development agreement. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. Next item is Westgate Draft Plan of Subdivision. The applicant is Arakatis IBI Group on behalf of A. Wallace Limited. The application is Plan of Subdivision, Official Plan Amendment, Zoning Bylaw Amendment. And the location is 114B Ontario Street. Mr. Warren, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
I will simply note that it's a good news item that's been under consideration for some time by the municipality, and what is being recommended by staff this evening comes as a collaborative effort with the owner and the owner's consulting team and staff, municipal staff and staff of the Conservation Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. I have a motion moved by Councillor Ferrettis, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that the report of the Planning and Development Department dated July 17th, 2024, Regarding the above mentioned proposed draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment be received. And further that council grant draft approval to application sub 2022-02, subject to the conditions of draft approval provided in this report. And further that council adopt approval of the official plan amendment application OPA 04-2022 in order to redesignate the subject lands in support of the development of the subject lands for residential development, and that this official plan amendment be submitted to the County of Northumberland for final approval. And further that council enacts a bylaw as attached to amend zoning bylaw 140-2002 as amended in order to rezone the subject lands, including site-specific provisions in order to implement the development of the subject lands as a residential plan of subdivision as otherwise detailed in this staff report. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Excited to see some density in Brighton with the sixplexes. I have no objections to any of this, but we had last time we considered this, heard that there was the phrase was said that the proponent is open to working with the county to have some affordable units, some subsidized units there. And we never heard a follow-up on that. I'm wondering if there is a follow-up on that.
Mr. Warren?
At this juncture, I don't have a follow-up on that, but I could look into that for sure and get back to you by email if you'd like. Sure.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no items for information purposes. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. The first is a zoning bylaw amendment, Z04-2024. It's moved by Councillor Fredis and seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140-2002, as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands located at 0 Whites Road and 398 Whites Road, legally described as Part Lot 32 and Lot 33, Concession 1, Brighton, closed by C. Is that a 1 or an L? That's an I. CI 39807, Part Lot 32, Concession 1, Brighton, Part 138R 5364, except Part 139R 10408, and Southwest 1/4 Lot 31, Concession 1, Brighton, Southeast 1/4 Lot 32, Concession 1, Brighton. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. I will not. I can hardly say it at the speed I speak. The next bylaw is with regard to zoning bylaw amendment Z11-2023. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140-2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands located at 140 Smith Street, legally described as part of Lot 32, Concession A, Brighton. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And the next is with regard to Westgate Plan of Subdivision. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140-2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands called Westgate Subdivision, which is located at 114B Ontario Street, described as part of survey of part. That should be part, right? It says park, but it should be part. Correct? Survey of part lot 28 and part of part lot 29, west side of Ontario Street, registered plan 28 and part of lot 4, concession 1, Municipality of Brighton. Councillor Wheeldon, as the mover, I have made a couple of editorial changes from park to part twice. Are you okay with that? Very I'm looking at our planning staff.
There are things as park lots.
Okay,
If they're registered as such, so it may very well be the accurate description. So maybe the direction of council can be that staff administratively confirm the legal description for the purposes of the record.
I can also say from experience that nobody types out a legal description, you copy paste.
yeah. So I'm gonna reread it the way it was written and not try to be smarter than the people who write these things. How's that sound? The council gives, so it's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council gives a bylaw, it's the first, second, third reading, finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140/2002 as otherwise amended of the corporation of the municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands called Westgate Subdivision, which is located at 114B Ontario Street, described as part of survey of Park Lot 28 and part of Park Lot 29, west side of Ontario Street, Registered Plan 28, and part of Lot 4, Concession 1, Municipality of Brighton. Any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next is bylaw to adopt Amendment 16 to the official plan. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council gives a bylaw, its first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to adopt Amendment 16 to the official plan of the corporation of the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. The next is a bylaw to adopt Amendment 17 of the official plan. It's moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council gives a bylaw, its first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to adopt Amendment 17 to the official plan of the corporation of the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next is with regard to the Bon Road, former pit. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council gives a bylaw, its first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140/2002 as otherwise amended of the corporation of the municipality of Brighton as it applies to certain lands described as part of Lot 30, Concession A, Township of Brighton, being Part 2 on Plan 39R 10305 and Part 1 on Plan 39R 7869, except Part 1 on Plan 39R 14317 and part of Lot 31, Concession A, Township of Brighton, being Part 1 on Plan 39R 10305 and parts of Lot 31 and 32, Concession A, Township of Brighton, being Part 1 on Plan 38R 5291 and Part 1 on Plan 38R 1495, except Part 1 on Plan 39R 7659, all in the municipality of Brighton in the county of Northumberland. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion's carried. The only discussion should be, what are you talking about? Like, where is this? I hear you. No, we have to go 4 hours now, remember? We got lots of time. No, we still have to pass our curfew notice if we get to 9:30, but you don't get any more money. Sorry. Oh, you're looking at a finish line. Yeah. The next is to execute a development agreement between Brighton and 2731008 Ontario, Inc. It's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council gives a bylaw, its first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute a development agreement between the corporation of the municipality of Brighton and 2731008 Ontario, Inc. for the property located at part of Lot 30, Concession A, Township of Brighton, being Part 2 on Plan 39R 10305 and Part 1 on Plan 39R 7869, except Part 1 on Plan 39R 14317, and part of Lot 31, Concession A, Township of Brighton, being Part 1 on Plan 39R 10305, and parts of lots 31 and 32 concession A, Township of Brighton, being part 1 on Plan 38R 5291 and part 1 on Plan 38R 1495, except part 1 on Plan 39R 7659, all in the municipality of Brighton as in accordance with subsections 5126 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, Chapter P 13. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Well, it brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery that has a question with anything that was on tonight's agenda? Yes, sir. Get you to push that purple button and state your name for the record and ask your question.
I would say just for interest, so Mark Tao, I'm a planner for the applicant for the Ontario Street subdivision. I did check the legal description. It is properly described as a park block rather than park block, so.
So I undid my edits and we read it correctly the
Correct.
second time around.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. Appreciate it. Any other questions from members of the gallery? We have no closed session this evening, which brings us to our confirmatory bylaw moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council gives a bylaw for second and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Planning meeting held on July 17th, 2024. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And finally, a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that the July 17th, 2024 council meeting adjourn at 9:23 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thank you all for robust discussion and